today we're going to do two goals, 11.1 and 11.2. First, working with the square root method, which we've talked about already when we ended, when we were solving radical equations. So we're going to talk about the square root method again and build on it a little bit, okay? To use the square root method, remember that you have to have a squared term and a constant term. That's the only time you can use the square root method. So when you use the square root method, the equation must be in the form, again, a squared term and a constant term. So that's what that means by x squared equals k. So as we did previously, you want to isolate the squared term. Now, we're going to build on it because the squared term is not just going to be an x. Okay, so that's how we're going to build on it in goal 11.1 here. Okay, but you're going to isolate the squared term. You're going to square root both sides. And remember, when you square root both sides of something, you have the plus minus. You have two values there. And then you're going to solve it. Okay? So let's start off with some easier ones and then build up. So isolate the squared term. X squared is isolated. Square root both sides. The square root of x squared is x. 144 is a perfect square. The square root of 144 is 12. And I have plus minus. So obviously if it has a perfect square, take the square root of it. Next question. Isolate the squared term. It is square root both sides. Square root of x squared is x. Square root of 121 is 11. Square root of 81 is 9, plus minus. You do not have to go back and check these. On the next one, isolate the square term. So the square term is the x squared. 5 is not part of that square term. So we're going to divide by 5 first. So x squared equals 25. And then square root both sides. So square root, or x equals plus minus 5. On my next one, isolate the square term. It is square root both sides, and x equals. Now, this is the first one without a perfect square, so you just break it up like we did in goal 10. It's 4 times 15. So square root 4 is 2, 15 left, and plus minus. So plus minus 2 square root 15. Up to that point are kind of the ones you saw in goal 10.5, 10.6, 10.6. I don't remember if it was 5 or 6. Those are the ones you saw already. This next kind are not the ones you've seen. Okay? So isolate the square term. So we got to get that x squared by itself. So I'm going to add 4. Divide by 3. And now I'm going to square root both sides. Square root of x squared is x. Square root 7 we don't know, can't break it down, leave it square root 7 plus minus. And it's delaying, it's stalling on me here. There we go. So square root both sides, square root of x squared is x, square root 7 we don't know, plus minus. Now, this is where it really looks different. This is a squared term. It's not a single x, but because it's in parentheses, with the power of 2, it makes it a squared term. So we're going to square root both sides. This squared term here is isolated. So we're going to square root both sides. When you square root the square, you just get x minus 1. When we square root 64, we get 8. Plus, minus. Now, we're not finished here because x is not isolated. So this is where, in the directions above, I said to solve. So now I'm going to add 1. be very careful when you do this. It's going to look a little different than what you've seen. When you add 1 to both sides, put that 1, actually let me erase that and show that. Put that 1 in front of the 8. Because the value 8 has a plus minus on it. So this is giving you 2 different answers. When you move that 1 over and put it in front here, I have one more step to do because I get my 2 answers then. One of my answers is the 1 plus the 8, which is 9. And the other answer is the 1 minus the 8, which is negative 7. So you get 2 solutions. Anytime you're solving using the square root method, you always have 2 answers. Up to this point, we've just written plus minus in front of the answers, and then we haven't had to go any further. The plus minus indicates 2 answers. But when you have to isolate this x here and move this 1 over, then you have to create your answers there. Okay? So you're going to take the 1 plus the 8 and then the 1 minus the 8 to get my 2 solutions. Okay, similarly on the next example, my square is by itself, so I'm ready to square root both sides. The square root of x plus 2 squared is just x plus 2. Square root of 13 we do not know, it doesn't have a square or a square factor, but we do have our plus minus. And then we're going to subtract the 2 and put that in front of the plus minus. So negative 2 plus minus square root 13. At this point, I will not expect you to go any further with that. Okay, so we can leave our answer in radical form. And then on the last one here, isolate the square term. So this one has a coefficient in front of the square term, so you have to get rid of it first. So divide by 6. So I have x plus 3 squared equals 8. Square root both sides. So x plus 3 squared square root is x plus 3. 8 is not a perfect square, but it can break to 4 times 2. So it goes to 2 square root 2 plus minus. And then we need to get x alone, so we're going to subtract the 3. And when you move that over, put it in front of the plus minus. So the answer looks a little weird, but that's okay. Leave it in that form for right now. Don't do anything else to it. Okay, we're going to take about 10 minutes here